Our next contest of the Better Photography Weekly Challenge is Panoramas. Our judge and mentor is Mr. Amit Pasricha. Mr. Amit Pasricha is one of the world's foremost names in the field of panoramic photography. He believes that everything in this complex world is interrelated, and it's these connections that he tries to represent through his panoramic work. His collector's edition, the Monumental India book, made it to the top 10 coffee table books in the world. Its sequence, the Sacred India book, won the prestigious German Photo Book Award in 2014. His third panoramic book, India at Home, is a study of all encompassing home. In 2018, he founded India Lost and Found, a campaign focused on creating awareness around India's considerable but threatened built heritage. In 2019, he has taken upon himself to crowdsource a heritage map of India. Currently, he continues his long-term project on the side. One India Many Lives, a book on Indian dualities, and Story in a Photo. Hello.
Hi, Nilofer.
How are
Nice to
you?
be here on a chat with you, e-meeting these wonderfully crazy times. I wouldn't call them hard times because they're crazy, they're different and offer different opportunities. And thanks for bringing competitions to people because I think as we go inwards, we also are forced to create, and this is a real opportunity to actually create something meaningful, which we can reflect on. Perhaps with much more deeper meaning than just pure visuality, which is so much more surface level. It's nice to be here. It's nice to have a competition for just panoramas. And so before I jump into panoramas, I want to sort of take a position that it's sort of a word that has been a bit bastardized, and bastardized because it's by inherent wordplay, it means a certain thing, which I think I've spent a large part of my working years to try and correct that misunderstanding. And so let me jump into a few images, because what I'll do is I'll sort of take people through images that I've done. They may sort of give people ideas, or they may not, but it's something that I will enjoy sort of showing to everyone. Okay, so here we go. There you go. That unfortunately is what people think of as panorama, which is the great outdoors, long strips of it, very very scenic, and where the eye sort of goes from one place to another. But of course, here's a little quirk. I put two little people on the far corner, four little people, and so I'm still attempting to draw people's eye into that one corner after they've sort of studied the vista. But what I wanted to sort of move people away from was this idea of the panorama being the vista, which is again replicated in this image, which is again very, in my view, unmeaningful, because it sort of documents the space without really saying anything much. And that for me, something drawn from the Monumental India book, is a far more meaningful panorama, because there's a fixed point of interest. The eye circles and sort of stops at one quantity, and sort of focuses and sort of keeps looking to find more things, and keeps coming back to that one, to the India Gate itself, which is sort of hovering under that orange sky. And that I mean, for me, the key is like the bird's eye view in this context. Now, you would have noticed that between the first and the second and the third, there's a real difference of shape. So that is really what I wanted to sort of also point out to you, is that the panorama necessarily does not have to become a long strip. Now this is again 180 degrees. You can see those two vases on the left and the right. They're right beside my ears. And so experientially, this for me is also a panorama. It may not be that strip shape, but because it sort of captures the feeling of the entirety of the whole of the space that I occupy, for me, this too is a panorama. And going back very different from that long strip to this and back to that. So just sort of bear that in mind when you think of the word panorama. What does it really mean? Of course, at the end of the day, it's images stitched together. And of course, the earliest experiments with stitching images together were a very ad hoc, methodology where people tried various things with doing and representing and putting together, overlaying images together to create something. But in the sense of a panorama, it is more contiguous. Now, that on a first look is also a panorama, but for me that's a cheat panorama, because all that picture is a crop of a standard frame. You could shoot a horizontal frame and chop off the top and the bottom, and you'll end up with that image. But so it's not necessarily a panoramic, because it truly doesn't represent the space around you, just what's right in front of you. And contradict that against this, which is against the feeling of the vastness of the space. Because I mean, like Nilofer said earlier, I'm very keenly interested in the interrelatedness of things. And so early on, while I may have grasped the idea of what traditional photography was, which is the nodal points, and all those things apply to panoramic photography as well, and the rule of thirds, and having a point of interest. The panoramic sort of differed and diverged in a different direction at some point, because in the panorama you could have various nodal points. So you could have counterpoints where the eye could sort of look and appreciate one area and then come back to another area. Here, of course, it's very simple. And of course, the panoramas don't have to be necessarily very complicated. You can have very, very simple representation. And it's not necessarily that you need to look at something in a horizontal frame. I mean, here, of course, again, very, very, documentative in that sense, really creating a sense of what lay all around you as you walked in through that door into this space. And now sort of take that against this, which is on the right, you have the sunset, and on the left, you have what is lit by that sunset. So you've got the two worlds of the light of the observer and the observed, all sitting in that one single space. And so in a way, that panorama becomes a lot more philosophical than it becomes just a study of, or the world observed. Here, of course, there is that simplicity of that light on top of the treetop, but it's also the vastness or the scape of all the, stupas put together. Just to sort of share with you more images of this graphic sense of, the travel through spaces, but then something that's literally starting at your feet and extending all the way to, to the distant horizon. And the sense of scale. I mean, it's very interesting how the panorama is able to sort of, turn diminutive something that may be incredibly enormous and vast. And, nothing more clearer than that, which is a tall mountain, which has become a little studyscape, almost like the aerial photography tends to do, which is to sort of show a certain perspective and relation to what size is all about. And then again, so this is a version where the point of the center point of interest is actually the sand below just on the side of my feet of the boat, sort of going out to sea and its path thereon. So it's not necessary that you need to look at, swiveling around just the horizon line, but you could sort of be creative and look as the panorama as an expression, which is a lot more to do with what you're feeling. And here it's it's just the reverse. It's the dome. So it sort of turns everything a lot more graphical and abstract in a certain way. Uh, so you could sort of look at such an expression for pictures that you're going to produce for this competition. Now, coming back to that point of the interrelatedness of things, I mean, there's an clear opportunity of mixing something that's really close, where you can see the detail, with something that's far and offers perspective. And no better example than this to be able to sort of see that counterpoise of these two elements coming together in a singularity. Or of this, where literally the man runs over the boy runs over the landscape to reach um, a certain utopia, or the figure and the entire environment, because I mean the opportunities lies there to sort of be able to get the construct of what is the observer observing, so both the question and the answer sort of lay together in a singularity, and of course leading to complex forms. Now, I know that many of you are going to do it with your DSLRs, but there are a few of you who are also going to do it with your phone cameras. And so I need to warn you that if you're going to look at doing a panorama with your phone, which is you're going to swivel it across, then try and avoid people movement, because that's going to blur completely out of control. And so for the ones that are doing it with their camera, you need to be also very careful as to where your stitches are going to happen. Because I mean, across those stitch areas, if people happen to walk, then you will have people with missing limbs, and those won't look too nice in the images. So it's a bit of a challenge doing people panoramas, but it's something that's enjoyable. Remember, one of the clear things about a panorama is that you cannot construct it in a viewfinder. You cannot construct it on the screen of a phone. You've got to construct the panorama inside your head. And so, in a way, it sort of draws you closer to, film photography, because in a certain way, because you never got the feedback from the camera as to what you captured, you had to construct everything inside your head. And this goes a step further than that, because literally you're not even able to see it. You can just about appreciate the boundaries of your panorama without really knowing where they actually are going to lie. So it's a bit of a challenge, and it's also more exciting because the results that come back to you sometimes can really surprise you. And again, complex imagery of people on a bridge with houses. And of course, you're free to explore how a light, interplays with space. And it's always, it's nice when, there's this very, very strong sunlight sort of to work with. Um, or in this case, because this is camera and stitched together, um, the people need not necessarily all be together at the same time. So as you sort of, shoot parts of that panorama, the action unfolds almost to the extent that the story that you create is your story entirely, and not something that was presented to you. And of course, coming back to to this entire aspect of sizing, why should the Taj Mahal be towering, and why can't it be just a small bit in the cosmos? Um, and of course, coming to that image, which this is the longer version of the image, which ran on the Monumental India book, and I was, again, the sunset, um, as you know, will first light up the clouds on the opposite direction, and then slowly retreat back. The color will come back into the sunset. And so if you followed that 3-minute movement, you'd be able to sort of get that color through both ends of the sky. So this is sort of how I sort of think of the construct of a panorama as being completely experiential, because after all, it's not a moment in time. It's about the experience of being in a space. And of course, here being at a on a fire brigade ladder on a very, very stormy morning at the Jama Masjid. And all your rules of how you will look at light, how you will look at structure, how you would look at composition are all going to apply. So be careful of sort of how you construct your frame. There's no reason to say that because I'm shooting a panorama, I can get ugly. There's nothing wrong with being absolutely good and pretty about this. And of course, how spaces render themselves in a panorama is sort of kind of curious, because here, for example, the circle renders itself really beautifully in the panorama, and you're able to see the central form in this temple with the outer lining. And here, it's just the reverse. So this turret becomes a straight line. So as I swiveled across this turret, it became a one line, whereas actually in real space, this is a round form. And about interrelatedness here in terms of people. So there are three disparate people sort of leading one to the other, where you sort of keep going around in that triangle that they create. And of course, wonder at what's really going on in our world. But it's interesting how it sort of instead of giving answers, the photograph can lead to a lot more questions. And how just by fluke the Nazar Patu picks up the bird over the fort. And again, more in interplay of objects and spaces, which can be very fascinating. So I don't expect many of you are going to have an opportunity to really get around too much, and so you can explore what's in your immediate surroundings, through this technique. And I think that might be a lot more fun, because it's in the everyday objects that a lot of God lies. And so if you re-look at them with a certain different perspective, then you may come up with something very, very incredible. Here, for example, it's just two pavilions, and almost like how they're having a conversation with each other, with the elder pavilion, talking wisely to the younger one, or at least that's my imagination talking. And of course, the grave actually, which is very bare, with a starry sky over it in the underground chamber. And again, a large form where you can see that fireplace right in the center of the picture becomes so small, in this entirety of the space that the panorama creates. And of course, the legislative assembly becomes an amoebic form. And in a lot of ways, that's also the way it needed to have been appreciated as well, because I mean, it's just that we're not able to see it, because sometimes size becomes an issue with vis-a-vis how we look upon the world. And, a lot of our dominant discourse starts to play its own story inside our heads. And so it's nice to be able to sort of look at photography, to be able to recreate this and redefine this. And again, coming back to people, difficult to deal with people. So just be careful. Again, I was lucky. Of course, a lot of effort went into this, and more of people here. In some cases, the people also duplicated themselves. And that man who was looking up at the ceiling came to then, say his prayer. And so it sort of created an interesting story. And then again here, which this boy sort of goes down and floats further. So again ends up creating a story. Um, and viewpoints, because like I said, perspective becomes an important part of the panorama. So what's close, what's far, and what's really in full form, sort of becomes comes into play, the close and the far. Um, Here again, as well, though this could be sort of like I said in the earlier thing, this could be a cropped image, but it's not. It's actually a panorama, but it could have been. I can be critical of my own work as well. And this, where again, which was just a very ordinary moment, but it sort of lended itself into something that many things came together, and that there was a right time to do all of it. And of course, the question mark on the sky, again, a little philosophical thought. Uh, and leading on to other works, which is, the idea of, don't forget that, light and structure play a very important part. I wanted to sort of talk about the jagged edges, and I moved away into a lot of jagged edges in my later part of my work, because ultimately I was coming close to what the eye can see, and clearly the eye does not have a definitive boundary. You cannot say that this is where the eye stops seeing, because there's always peripheral vision. And just because the camera has a construct which is rectangular or square, doesn't mean that our picture must stop at the same boundary. And so in this construct, it was always a suggestion that our boundaries of our vision, and so our panorama and our picture and representation, because actually in truth what am I doing is I'm relating to you an experience of standing in that space, and that's what your panorama should attempt to do as well. Could look at the fact that the edges aren't straight. Just a few more random images. Again, because there are so many idiosyncrasies, we are fortunate to be part of a world that's got so much happening. There's tradition and modernity. There's the Gungat television sitting in the corner. There's so much that you can read into the picture, that it sort of the picture can say many things at the same time. And of course a singularity, which is in this case, of course, how people perceive themselves, and the worlds and their lives that they live, uh, and coming back to light. And as you can see, a little bit bulbous. I've not even fully straightened out the images. That itself is a bit of a task, and in certain cases I leave them sort of kind of distorted, because that sort of helps with my imagery. I'm not trying to always do architectural symmetry. And here, of course, there's the people walking in front, counterpoise against that marching army on top. And these people weren't there at the same time. And so like I said earlier, it became my story. And then going on to the same person. So this is a curious thing that may be possible to try sometime for you guys, is that the same person leads to telling a story of a space. So he looked on, and he looked, and he wished, and he walked away. And in this case, it's the act of praying. And then the panorama is a challenge, and so I'm going to end this presentation with an image which sort of goes in both directions, both horizontal and vertical, just to say, like, in a way, a semblance of a cross. So that's pretty much what I have for you here. I hope it's enough to give you some ideas of what is it that you could do with your imagery in this competition. There's a world to explore, and don't forget that while the rules of photography that lie for standard photography will apply to a panorama, you can sort of choose to break them from time to time to sort of go beyond the traditional narrative that the frame allows. So here your frame is literally the world around you. So have fun, and I hope to review those images and get excited by what I see. So I also wanted to talk to you about India Lost and Found, which is my current passion. And as you have heard in the introduction, we're building a heritage map of India. And so currently we have as many as 600 interns with us, and the photography is yet to begin. And that's an area that I think that we should all join into, because it's a very contributory crowd creative platform, with the idea that together across the country, we could sort of come together to create an incredible resource that can not only benefit people looking out for these monuments, but also the monuments themselves, because through awareness lies their resurrection and an acknowledgement of all that went in to create these wonderful forms that make India such a vibrant cultural space. So join the India Lost and Found initiative that's on Instagram, and see what we're up to, and put your hand up and volunteer with us as well. Thank you.